"Get this pauper away from the table," she shouted, her finger stabbing the air in my direction. The room went silent. Forks froze midair. My heart pounded, and my hand trembled as I slowly withdrew. I turned to my son Ethan, hoping, praying for him to defend me. But he didn't. He lowered his gaze, his lips pressed tightly together, as if ashamed too of me. A security guard stepped forward, hesitating only because I looked so small, so frail. My daughter-in-law's eyes flashed coldly. And in that moment, standing in the home I had once sacrificed everything to help Ethan build, I realized the cruelest truth of all. I no longer belonged. But what Vanessa didn't know was that the story was far from over. My name is Helen Carter, and I am 67 years old. People often say time leaves its mark on the body, and I suppose that's true. My gray curls fall softly around my face. My hazel eyes carry more memories than I care to admit, and my hands, once steady from years of shelving books, tremble now and then when I pour a cup of tea. For nearly 40 years, I was a school librarian. My days were filled with the quiet shuffle of pages, the scent of paper and ink, and the laughter of children discovering worlds beyond their own. It wasn't glamorous, but it was meaningful. I didn't expect to grow old alone. My husband, Michael, had been my anchor, the calm in every storm. But cancer came without warning, swift and merciless, and 8 years ago, it took him from me. The day he passed, the house fell silent in a way I can never quite describe. After that, there was only Ethan, my only child, my purpose. I promised myself I would give him everything. I worked 2 jobs, days at the library, evenings cleaning offices downtown. I skipped meals so he wouldn't have to. And when the tuition bills piled high, I sold the gold wedding band Michael had slipped on my finger so many years ago. "It's only a ring," I told myself, though it felt like giving away a piece of my soul. Ethan grew into a tall, confident man. At 35, he wore sharp suits and carried himself with a certainty that made me proud. He became a financial consultant, the kind of professional people trusted with their futures. For a while, I believed I had succeeded. And then came Vanessa. She was 32, a former model who turned her striking looks into a career in real estate. With flowing blonde hair and calculating blue eyes, she was the kind of woman who made others stop and stare. When Ethan first brought her home, I felt a spark of hope. Perhaps she would be the daughter I never had, someone to share recipes with, to laugh with on quiet afternoons. But almost immediately, I sensed the chill beneath her smile. She studied me the way a jeweler examines a flawed stone, as though she already knew my worth and found it lacking. At dinners, her compliments came coated in venom. "Oh, Helen, that cardigan is charming. You really do have such unique taste." Her laughter was light, but her eyes cut sharp. Ethan, not wanting conflict, just smiled and moved on. I told myself it didn't matter. Mothers endure. That's what we do. But then there was Oliver, my grandson. Sweet, chubby-cheeked Oliver, whose laughter filled the empty rooms of my heart. I loved cradling him in the rocking chair, humming the same lullabies I once sang to Ethan. One afternoon, while I rocked him to sleep, Vanessa swept into the room, her gaze fixed on me with icy precision. "Helen, put him down. He doesn't need to get used to you. I don't want him clinging to someone who won't always be around." The words landed like a slap. My throat tightened as I gently laid Oliver back in his crib, pressing a trembling kiss to his tiny forehead. Vanessa scooped him up as though I were nothing more than an intruder, her manicured nails brushing against his blanket. From that day forward, she always found excuses to keep Oliver away from me. And in those quiet, aching moments, I remembered a promise. Ethan, just a boy then, had clutched my hand after Michael's funeral, his voice small but fierce. "Mom, don't worry. I'll always take care of you, no matter what." That promise carried me through the hardest years. It kept me working late, pushing forward, believing my sacrifices had meaning. But now, seeing him stand silent while Vanessa stripped away every piece of dignity I had left, I realized that promise had turned to dust. Still, somewhere deep inside me, a stubborn ember remained, quiet but unyielding. I might have looked small, frail, forgotten, but I was not finished. Not yet. It began with whispers, the kind of subtle wounds that didn't draw blood but cut deep all the same. Vanessa had a gift for cruelty wrapped in silk. "Maybe you shouldn't eat that, Helen," she'd remark at dinner, her fork clinking lightly against the china. "At your age, you need to watch your cholesterol. We wouldn't want you to slow down." The table would chuckle politely, as though she'd made a harmless joke. I forced a smile, though my cheeks burned and my throat felt tight. Ethan sat at the head of the table, handsome and silent, eyes down, refusing to meet mine. Her words were like frost on every gathering. She'd smile sweetly in front of guests, but the message was always the same. I was an outsider. The little things I offered from the heart began to vanish. Knitted scarves, framed photos of Ethan as a child, even an antique vase that had belonged to Michael's mother. When I asked, Vanessa shrugged. "Oh, those? They didn't fit our decor. I gave them away. You understand, don't you?" I nodded, though my chest ached. Every vanished gift felt like erasing me from their lives piece by piece. Still, I clung to Oliver, my sweet grandson. His laughter filled the cracks in my heart. I loved rocking him in the old chair, singing the lullabies I once sang to Ethan. One chilly afternoon, I arrived early to help, while Ethan and Vanessa attended a gala. Oliver had just fallen asleep against my shoulder when Vanessa came in. Her perfume hit me first, sharp and heavy. "Helen," she said, her eyes narrowing, "put him down. We don't need you tonight." "We hired a sitter, more reliable." I froze. "But I thought," her lips curled, "we can't keep letting you hover, Helen. Oliver needs consistency. Professional care." The words stung more than any slap. I placed Oliver gently in his crib, pressing a kiss to his soft hair while my eyes blurred with tears. Vanessa swept him up in her arms as if I were nothing more than a stranger trespassing. From that day forward, she always found excuses. "He's napping. He's got a play date. He's too busy." It was as if she were building a wall, brick by brick, shutting me out of the one joy I had left. But the cruelty didn't stop there. On Oliver's 5th birthday, I spent hours baking a chocolate cake, the same kind Ethan used to beg for every year as a boy. I carried it into their backyard, decorated with balloons and laughter. For a moment, I felt proud, hopeful even, that I might contribute something meaningful. Before I could set it down, Vanessa intercepted me. "Oh, Helen," she said loudly, her voice lilting for the crowd. "We already have a professional cake. Yours looks homemade." Laughter rippled through the group of parents and neighbors. I stood frozen, the cake heavy in my hands. Vanessa leaned closer, her breath suffocating. "Why don't you sit down and relax? We don't want Oliver confused by too many desserts." I set the cake aside, untouched, and sat alone in a corner while Oliver blew out candles on a cake I hadn't made. The children cheered. Vanessa beamed at the guests. And I smiled weakly, my heart cracking quietly inside me. Later, as the sun dipped low and guests drifted away, I heard Vanessa's voice by the patio. "She clings to us like dead weight. It's embarrassing." "Oh." And Ethan, my Ethan, answered in a voice so weary and cold it made me shiver. "You're right, I'll talk to her." The words echoed like a verdict. The boy who once held my hand after his father's funeral and promised, "I'll always take care of you, Mom," now agreed I was nothing but a burden. The final blow came weeks later. I had stopped by unannounced, hoping for just a glimpse of Oliver. The house gleamed with polished wood and smelled of expensive candles. Vanessa opened the door, her smile thin as a blade. Ethan stood behind her, arms folded, his face unreadable. "Helen," Ethan began, his voice flat. "We need to talk." I clutched my purse, dread coiling in my stomach. "What is it, sweetheart?" I asked softly, searching his eyes for the boy I once knew. "It's not working anymore," he said. "You coming around so much. Vanessa's right. It's better if you stay away. Stay away." The words knocked the air from my lungs. My knees trembled, but I forced myself to stand tall. "I only wanted to see Oliver," I whispered. Vanessa's reply was merciless. "He doesn't need your kind of love. You're just baggage." The silence afterward was louder than any scream. Ethan didn't protest. He didn't even look at me. I turned slowly, each step heavy as lead, and walked down the path from their front door. The cold evening air bit at my skin, but inside I was numb. Behind me, the door clicked shut, sealing me out of a home I had sacrificed everything to help them build. And yet, as I stood at the curb, tears stinging my eyes, a spark flickered inside me. They believed I was finished, that I would fade into the shadows of my little rented apartment, forgotten. But they didn't know me. They didn't know the fire still burning quietly in the ashes. This wasn't the end, not by far. After that night when Ethan told me to stay away, I tried. I told myself to give them space, to be patient. But the silence wrapped itself around me like a heavy fog I couldn't escape. My phone, once alive with Ethan's calls and Oliver's giggles over speakerphone, now sat lifeless on the counter. Every buzz was a wrong number. Every ring, a scam call. Still, I picked it up each time, my heart leaping, only to shatter a second later. Money slipped through my fingers like sand. The rent devoured most of my small Social Security check. After groceries and medication, there was barely enough left for the electric bill. Some nights, I sat in the dim light of a single lamp, eating toast and weak tea, pretending the hunger pangs didn't matter. My body grew weaker. Knees that once carried me through crowded school libraries now ached climbing the narrow stairs of my apartment. My hands trembled so badly in the mornings that I spilled half my coffee. And yet, I still wanted to show them I cared. One Sunday morning, I baked a small batch of blueberry muffins, Ethan's favorite as a child. I carried them carefully to their porch, planning only to leave them there. I didn't intend to knock. I didn't want to intrude. But before I could set them down, the door swung open. Vanessa filled the frame, her eyes narrowing the moment they landed on me. "What are you doing here, Helen?" I just wanted to drop these off. For Ethan, for Oliver. Her heels clicked sharply as she stepped closer. "We told you to stay away. Do you not understand simple directions?" Ethan appeared behind her, his arms crossed. His face, the same one that had once lit up with boyish laughter, now looked like stone. "Mom, you can't just show up." "I didn't mean to intrude," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I only thought maybe Oliver would like them." Vanessa yanked the basket from my hands, her lips curling. "These belong in the trash." As she shoved it back, the wicker edge cut into my palm. I gasped softly as a thin line of blood welled up. "For heaven's sake," Vanessa muttered, always making a scene. Ethan glanced at my hand, then quickly looked away. "Mom," he said flatly, "please leave." I turned to go, my hand throbbing, when I heard a voice that pierced through everything. "Grandma?" "Oliver. My sweet boy." He came running, arms outstretched, joy spilling across his face. "Grandma!" "Oh." I bent, my tears ready to fall, desperate to hold him, but Vanessa stepped in, her manicured hand clamping down on his shoulder. "Oliver, back inside." Now, the light in his eyes dimmed. His little hand reached toward me, fingers curling in the air, but the door slammed shut before I could touch him. I stood frozen on the porch, blood dripping onto the muffins. The smell of blueberries mingled with the metallic tang of my wound. That night, I sat in the flickering glow of a weak lamp, cleaning the cut myself. On the shelf above me, Michael's photo caught the dim light. His warm smile seemed to whisper, "Stay strong, Helen." My chest tightened. I pressed my fingers to the frame. "I'm trying, Michael," I whispered back. The world outside grew colder. At the bus stop, two women stood near me, whispering. They say she's unstable, always clinging to her son. Poor Vanessa. I turned my face into the wind, tears stinging my eyes, pretending I didn't hear. At the clinic, a nurse scolded loudly, as though I were a child. "Ma'am, you forgot your insurance card again. Please be more careful." I fumbled through my purse with trembling hands. Behind me, a man groaned, muttering, "These old folks always slow everyone down." Even at church, my sanctuary once, the whispers followed me. I sat in the last pew, clutching the hymnal. My niece, who once called every Sunday, hadn't answered in months. I sang quietly, my voice drowned by the choir. Everywhere I turned, I was invisible. Or, worse, an embarrassment. But in the stillness of those long nights, staring up at the cracked ceiling of my apartment, a thought began to burn. They thought they had broken me, that I would fade quietly, forgotten. But they didn't know me. And soon, they would. It happened on a gray Thursday morning. I woke to a pounding in my chest and a dizziness that sent me gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. My knees buckled, and I lowered myself slowly into the chair, the world spinning around me. I told myself it would pass, but it didn't. By afternoon, I could barely catch my breath. At the clinic, I sat shivering in the too bright waiting room. The nurse at the desk gave me a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Insurance card, ma'am?" I left it at home," I whispered. She sighed loudly, tapping her nails on the desk. "You'll need to bring it next time. Sit down." I obeyed, clutching my purse in my lap. Around me, younger patients scrolled on their phones, barely glancing at the old woman hunched in the corner. When Ethan and Vanessa walked in moments later, laughter echoing between them, my breath caught. "Ethan," I managed weakly, raising a trembling hand. Vanessa's smile froze when she saw me. She leaned toward Ethan, whispering, though not softly enough, "She's here too? What a coincidence." Her laugh was sharp. "Or maybe she just can't stop following us." Ethan frowned, glancing at me only briefly. "Mom, are you all right?" I nodded quickly, though my heart thudded painfully. "Just dizzy. I thought I should get checked." Vanessa chuckled, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Always something with you, Helen. Honestly, it's embarrassing. People are staring." I looked around. And yes, people were staring. A young couple with a child. An older man with his wife. Their eyes held pity, or worse, annoyance. Heat rushed to my cheeks. I wanted to vanish. Later, after the doctor prescribed more pills I could barely afford, I stumbled out of the clinic into the gray drizzle. My thin coat did little to stop the chill. I sat on the bench at the bus stop, the paper bag of medication heavy in my lap, and thought of Michael. "You promised you'd always be with me," I whispered silently. But I've never felt so alone. The bus splashed through a puddle as it pulled up, spraying cold water onto my shoes. I climbed aboard slowly, ignoring the sighs of impatience from the line behind me. I sat in the very back, clutching the bag, staring out the rain-streaked window. That weekend, I forced myself to attend church again. I told myself maybe faith would lift me. But as I stepped inside, whispers followed. I caught a fragment as I passed a group of women. "Vanessa says she's been unstable for years." Poor Ethan. My vision blurred. I sat in the last pew, the hymnal trembling in my hands. The voices of the choir swelled, but I could barely hear them. When the service ended, I tried to approach Ethan and Oliver in the crowd. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, Vanessa's hand firm on his arm. "Ethan," I whispered, Just a hug, please. Vanessa leaned in, her voice low and cutting. Not here, Helen. Don't make a scene. You've embarrassed him enough. Oliver looked at me, confusion in his little eyes, but Vanessa pulled him away swiftly. I stood rooted in the aisle. As the congregation filed out around me, my knees trembled. The church bells tolled overhead, each strike echoing in my hollow chest. By the time I reached my apartment, the sky had darkened. I collapsed onto the worn sofa, the medication bottles rattling as they hit the floor. For the first time, I wondered if maybe Vanessa was right, maybe I was nothing but a burden. But even in that moment of despair, a spark remained. I touched Michael's photo, whispering through tears. They don't know me. They think I'm finished, but I'm not. And deep inside, beneath the weight of shame and loneliness, the fire grew hotter. The days after the church service felt heavier than any I had ever known. I moved like a ghost through my small apartment. I washed the same 2 dishes, folded the same blanket, stared at the same clock ticking too loud. Bills sat unopened. Pill bottles lined the counter like silent judges. One morning, hunger finally forced me out the door. The air bit through my thin coat as I shuffled to the corner store. At the register, I fumbled for coins. The cashier sighed, and the man behind me tapped his foot, impatient. "Take your time, sweetheart." I looked back. A woman my age, wearing a bright scarf that seemed to carry a bit of spring, smiled at me. Her eyes were kind. Outside, she introduced herself. "Margaret, a widow. Like me. Would you like to come by for some coffee?" she asked. "It gets lonely, you know." My instinct was to decline. I had been told I was a burden too many times, but her sincerity pulled a small yes from my lips. Her kitchen was filled with the scent of cinnamon and apples. A small radio hummed an old tune. I offered to slice the apples for her pie. My hands trembled, but she guided mine gently. "Still good with a knife," she teased, and I laughed a real laugh, surprising even myself. We traded stories of our husbands. She showed me an old photograph of hers in a Navy uniform. I shared how Michael had proposed to me in the quiet corner of a library, kneeling with a book in hand. The memory wrapped around me like a warm blanket. Before I left, Margaret pressed a jar of homemade jam into my hands. "Promise you'll come back," she said. "We women need to look out for each other." Walking home, I clutched the jar to my chest. For the first time in weeks, I whispered to Michael's photo in my mind. Maybe I'm not as alone as I thought. A few days later, I spotted a flyer at the grocery store. "Volunteer opportunities, local library needs help." I tore off a tab. At home, I stared at it for hours. Fear gnawed at me. Could I still matter? Could I risk being told I wasn't wanted again? Finally, with shaking hands, I dialed. "This is Helen," I said softly. I saw the flyer about volunteers. The librarian's voice lit up. "We'd be so grateful. We need help shelving books and with the children's reading hour. Can you come this Friday?" That morning, I dressed carefully. A modest blouse, my hair pinned back. My knees ached, but my spirit pushed me forward. When I entered the library, the scent of old paper and wood polish nearly undid me. I remembered sitting with Ethan when he was 6, his little head resting on my shoulder as I read Charlotte's Web. My throat tightened, but I kept walking. A little girl tugged at my sleeve, a book upside down in her hands. "Can you help me?" she asked, eyes wide. I smiled, truly smiled, and showed her how to hold it. "Thank you," she chirped, skipping away. As I shelved books, I caught my reflection in the tall window. My face was older, lined with years of sacrifice. But in my eyes, I saw it. A spark. That afternoon, I sat at a small desk in the back and opened a worn leather notebook Michael had given it to me on our 10th anniversary. I hadn't written in it in years. Slowly, I penned the words, "I am still here, I am not gone. They cannot erase me. Closing the book, I felt steadier than I had in months. On my way home, I froze when I saw Ethan and Vanessa across the street. Vanessa laughed loudly, tugging Oliver's hand. He spotted me, his eyes lighting, but Vanessa pulled him forward before he could wave. My chest tightened, but this time, I didn't crumble. I turned and kept walking. That evening, the sunset painted the sky pink and gold. Margaret called, inviting me for tea the next day. I placed the jar of jam beside Michael's photo and whispered, "They think I've faded, but I haven't, and soon they'll know it." For weeks, I had lived in the shadows, breathing but not living. But now, mornings felt different. The jar of Margaret's jam glowed like a small sun on my kitchen counter. I brewed tea and hummed softly, the sound strange to my own ears. I had forgotten what it felt like to fill my apartment with music, however faint. At the library, children's laughter echoed between the tall shelves. Their voices reminded me of the days Ethan would sit cross-legged on the carpet, asking for just one more story. I shelved books slowly, savoring the smell of old paper and polished wood. Some afternoons, Margaret would meet me afterward, her laughter spilling into my small kitchen as we shared tea and pie. The four walls that had once felt like a cage now held warmth. Then, one evening, while dusting Michael's old box of belongings, I found it a thick envelope, wedged beneath yellowed newspapers. My hands shook as I pulled it free. Inside was a letter in Michael's handwriting, familiar and steady even after all these years. "Helen, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it as far as we dreamed. You've always been the heart of this family. I want you to know you will never be alone. I left a safety deposit box under your name at First Federal Bank. Everything inside is for you and for Ethan. Promise me you'll use it when you need it most. Love always, Michael." I pressed the paper to my lips, tears streaming down my face. My chest ached as though Michael himself had reached across the years to hold me. Could it really still be there? The next morning, I took the bus downtown. My heart pounded as I clutched my worn purse. At the bank, the manager, a kind man with silver hair, studied my ID, then smiled gently. "Mrs. Thompson, I believe we've been keeping something of yours safe for a very long time." It led me to a quiet room. The deposit box was heavier than I expected. My fingers fumbled with the lock until it clicked. Inside lay neat stacks of bonds, a few envelopes of savings, and, on top, a small brass key with a tag, "Cabin, Lake Pine." My breath caught. Michael had spoken of this cabin when we were young, dreaming of quiet evenings by the water. I thought it had been just talk. But here, it was real. "Michael," I whispered, clutching the key. "You never left me after all." That weekend, Margaret insisted on driving me there. The road wound through tall pines, sunlight dappling the dirt path. When we reached the cabin, my eyes filled. The lake shimmered like a mirror, reflecting the blue sky and the swaying trees. The cabin was old but strong, dust floating in the beams of light that streamed through cracked shutters. Margaret pushed open the windows, laughing as cobwebs danced in the breeze. "It just needs a woman's touch," she said. We spent the day scrubbing, airing out quilts, and sweeping the floors. My knees ached, but my heart soared. At one point, Margaret and I collapsed into rocking chairs on the porch, sipping lemonade we'd brought in a cooler. "You belong here," she told me, her hand warm on mine. That night, I built a small fire in the stone hearth. Sitting in the glow, I opened Michael's leather notebook and wrote carefully, "This is my second beginning." "Thank you, Michael." The next morning, birdsong woke me. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. But even in peace, the world had ways of reminding me. On a trip back into town, I walked past Ethan and Vanessa's house. The curtains were wide open. Through the window, Vanessa laughed loudly with two of her friends, gesturing proudly at a new kitchen island. All thanks to my planning, she boasted. "We've managed beautifully. I told Ethan I know how to stretch $1 better than anyone." The words sliced through me. That house, my house, had been built with Michael's savings and my sacrifices. I gripped the straps of my purse until my knuckles whitened. Later that day, outside the grocery store, I overheard two women whispering. "They say Ethan's house has doubled in value already. That Vanessa, she really turned their lives around." "Lucky woman," the other agreed. "Lucky." The word echoed bitterly. That night, back at the cabin, I sat by the fire and opened the notebook again. My pen scratched across the page. "They think I'm gone, but I'm not. They think I've faded, but I'm still here. And soon, they'll know it." I placed the brass key beside Michael's photograph on the mantel. His smile seemed to glow in the firelight, as if urging me forward. "Yes, Michael," I whispered. "It's time." And for the first time, I didn't just feel alive. I felt powerful. The cabin by the lake gave me more than shelter. It gave me a reason to rise each morning. Its wooden floors creaked like old friends, and the smell of pine wrapped around me when I opened the shutters. I was no longer living in a prison of silence. I was preparing. Margaret visited often, sometimes with a basket of muffins, sometimes just to sit on the porch with me. "You've changed, Helen," she said one afternoon as we shelved books at the library. "How so?" I asked, sliding a worn copy of Little Women into place. "There's fire in you now. You don't hide your eyes anymore." I smiled faintly. "Fire needs a purpose." "And you'll find it," she replied, her hand squeezing mine. I began to walk through town more often. At the grocery store, clerks greeted me kindly. At church, women invited me to join their prayer circle again. One Sunday, I baked a pie for the church fundraiser. As I handed it over, a woman whispered, "It's so good to see you back, Helen. We missed you." Their words soothed wounds I hadn't realized were still open. Vanessa had tried to erase me, to paint me as weak, but the town hadn't forgotten. They remembered Michael. They remembered me. Still, the bitterness lingered. I often found myself on Ethan's street, walking slowly past their house. From the outside, it looked picture perfect. Flowers in the yard, Oliver's toys scattered on the grass, the smell of barbecue drifting on weekends. Ethan carried bags of groceries, while Vanessa chatted on her phone, her laughter sharp and confident. One evening, as the sun dipped low, I paused behind the hedge across the street. Vanessa was on the porch, her voice carrying easily in the quiet air. "Oh, Ethan's poor mother," she sighed dramatically to a neighbor. "She just can't manage anymore. We've been doing everything possible. Honestly, we're the only thing standing between her and the nursing home. She's lucky we take her calls." The neighbor clucked in sympathy. I gripped the hedge so hard the leaves snapped beneath my fingers. Lucky? After all my sacrifices, she dared to call me lucky. That night, back at the cabin, I lit the fire and opened Michael's leather notebook. The page trembled beneath my pen as I wrote, "They call me a burden. They call me weak. But I know the truth. I will not let Michael's legacy or mine be erased. Soon, they will see who I truly am." I stared at the words until the ink dried. Over the next weeks, I wove myself back into the fabric of the town. Margaret introduced me to her quilting group, where women shared stories over steaming mugs of coffee. I volunteered at the food drive, stacking cans and offering smiles. Slowly, my name returned to conversations, not as pity, but as respect. One Sunday, after service, an older man approached me. "You're Michael Thompson's wife, aren't you?" "Yes," I said softly. "I worked with him years ago. Fine man. He always talked about a cabin by the lake, said he wanted you to have a place of peace." My throat tightened. "He gave me that gift." The man's eyes warmed. "He'd be proud of you." Walking home that day, I felt taller, stronger. Yet the bitterness of Vanessa's words clung to me like smoke. That evening, I returned to Ethan's street. The curtains were wide open. I saw Vanessa hosting a dinner, laughter spilling from the brightly lit dining room. She poured wine for her guests, her voice carrying across the lawn. "We've done so well, Ethan and I. You wouldn't believe how far we've come. It's all thanks to smart planning. Really, we've built this life ourselves." The words burned in my ears. Built themselves? The money had come from Michael's sacrifices, from my endless years of work and saving. They were living my life, wearing my legacy as their own. I turned away, my breath steady, not broken. Back at the cabin, I added a new entry to the notebook. "They think I am gone, invisible, erased, but I am still here. And soon, I will act. Not from cruelty, but for justice, for truth, for Michael." I placed the brass cabin key beside Michael's photo on the mantel. His smile glowed in the firelight, as if nodding in agreement. And for the first time, I allowed myself to whisper aloud, "I know where to begin." I knew revenge could not be rushed. Like tending a fire, it required patience, feeding the flames slowly until they burned steady and bright. So I began with the smallest of sparks. At the library, I volunteered for children's reading hour. The first Friday, I stood at the front of a circle of eager faces, holding Charlotte's Web close to my chest. My voice trembled on the first line until I saw their eyes widen, full of trust. "Who here loves stories?" I asked softly. A sea of little hands shot up. As I read, the room filled with laughter. When I changed my voice for Wilbur the pig, giggles bubbled like music. A little boy with freckles tugged at my sleeve afterward. "You sound like my grandma," he whispered shyly. Tears pricked my eyes. "That's the kindest thing anyone has told me," I said, touching his hand gently. Soon, parents stopped me in the aisles. "Helen, my daughter talks about you every night," one mother said. "You've brought something back to this town." Another added, "You remind us what real kindness looks like." The whispers that once branded me as a burden faded, replaced with smiles and warmth. Even the pastor at church began to mention me in sermons. Our dear Helen, giving back to the children. One Saturday, Margaret and I walked through the farmer's market. Stalls overflowed with fresh apples, jars of honey, handmade quilts. Vendors greeted me warmly. "Good to see you again, Helen." I left with a small basket of peaches, my spirit lighter than it had been in years. It was there, among the laughter and smells of kettle corn, that I first noticed the shift. People turned toward me instead of away. They remembered me. They remembered Michael. And then, fate tested me. The next morning after church, as sunlight streamed through the tall windows, I stepped outside into the crisp air. Margaret walked beside me, humming. Suddenly, a small figure darted from the crowd. "Grandma?" Oliver's voice pierced the air, pure and bright. My breath caught as he barreled toward me, his arms flung wide. I knelt instinctively, my knees aching, as he crashed into my embrace. His laughter rang against my chest. I buried my face in his hair, the scent of soap and sunshine flooding my senses. "Oh, Oliver," I whispered, clutching him tight. "I've missed you so much." For a moment, time froze. Around us, people watched, some smiling, some whispering. Then Vanessa's voice cut through like broken glass. "Oliver?" The crowd parted as she strode forward, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement. Her smile was wide, but her eyes were cold, calculated. "Well, isn't this sweet?" she said, her tone dripping with false warmth. "But we mustn't bother Grandma, darling. She has other things to do." She reached for him, but Oliver clung tighter. "I want to stay with Grandma," he cried, his voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Margaret stepped closer, her brows raised. Vanessa's smile faltered for the briefest moment, the mask slipping. "Another time, Oliver," she said smoothly. tugging at his arm. I met her gaze, calm and unflinching. "Yes," I said softly but firmly. "Another time. I'll be waiting." Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of unease flashing across her face before she turned sharply, pulling Oliver away. The murmurs lingered long after she left. I saw the way people looked at me, not with pity, but with sympathy, even admiration. Vanessa had not expected witnesses. That evening, Margaret came to the cabin for tea. I told her the whole story, my hands still trembling. "She's worried," Margaret said knowingly. "You've slipped through the cracks in her story. People see you now, Helen, not the version she's been feeding them." I sipped my tea, my resolve hardening. Good. Let her worry. Later, by the fire's glow, I opened Michael's leather notebook. On a fresh page, I wrote slowly, "Today, Oliver remembered me. Today, Vanessa's mask slipped, and the town saw it. This is only the beginning. I will not strike in anger. I will strike in truth." I set the pen down, the words blazing brighter than the fire before me. "They think I'm weak," I whispered into the flames. "They think I've faded, but I know now where to begin." The week leading up to the harvest dinner felt different, almost electric. For the first time in years, I wasn't watching life pass me by, I was part of it. Margaret and I spent 2 afternoons in her kitchen, sleeves rolled up, flour dusting the counters. "Michael always did love your apple pie," she said, handing me the rolling pin. I smiled faintly. "He used to sneak slices before they cooled. I'd scold him, but truth be told, I loved it." Margaret chuckled. "I bet he'd be grinning ear to ear if he could see you now." I paused, hands stilling on the dough. "Sometimes I feel him here, especially in the cabin, like he left pieces of himself for me to find." "You're not wrong," she said softly. "Men like Michael never truly leave. They just wait for us to be ready to feel them again." We baked 3 pies, the scent of cinnamon and apples filling every corner. As the crusts browned, I looked at Margaret, my eyes stinging. "Do you think I can do it? Stand in front of everyone again, after all they've heard?" Margaret laid her flour-dusted hand over mine. "You're stronger than you think, Helen. And you don't have to prove yourself to Vanessa. You only have to show the truth." The morning of the dinner, I walked into town with Margaret. The air was crisp, leaves crunching underfoot. The fellowship hall bustled with activity. Children rehearsed a hymn. Men strung lanterns across the ceiling. Women arranged platters of food on long tables. The smell of roasted turkey and cornbread filled the air. "Helen," voices called. "Over here." Neighbors waved as though I'd never been gone. My heart swelled with cautious hope. That evening, the hall was full. Nearly every family in town had come, dressed in their Sunday best. Laughter echoed as children darted between chairs, the clink of dishes and silverware filling the air. Margaret and I placed our pies on the dessert table. Compliments came quickly. "Helen, you've outdone yourself. It's been too long since we've tasted your baking." Pastor Hill was right. "You still bring joy wherever you go." I tried to absorb their warmth, though I felt Vanessa's gaze on me like a cold wind. She sat near the front, her dress immaculate, her smile fixed. Ethan sat beside her, quiet, his eyes darting between us. Oliver fidgeted, swinging his legs under the table. When Pastor Hill called me forward, the room hushed. My knees shook, but I lifted my chin. "Lord," I began, my voice trembling only slightly. "We thank you for the harvest, for the food before us, for friends, for family, and for love, the kind that carries us through hardship and binds us together even when the world tries to pull us apart." When I finished, the hall erupted into applause. People smiled warmly, some even stood to clap. My cheeks flushed, and for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged again. But Vanessa wasn't clapping. She leaned toward her neighbor, her voice carrying just enough. "It's touching, really. Helen does love the spotlight. But poor thing, she struggles so much. Ethan and I have had to pay her bills, keep her afloat. We'd never say it, of course, but without us, she'd have nothing." The words struck like daggers. A few heads turned, whispers spreading. My pulse pounded, shame threatening to choke me. And then Oliver's voice rang out, clear as a bell. "That's not true, Mommy." Gasps rippled through the hall. Oliver stood on his chair, cheeks pink but his eyes blazing with honesty. "Grandma has her own house. She showed me the cabin by the lake, and she makes the best cookies at the library. You said I couldn't have any, but she let me. She's fine all by herself." A hush fell, then laughter burst out. Not mocking, but warm, delighted laughter. Someone clapped. Another joined in. Soon half the hall was smiling at me, shaking their heads at Vanessa. Vanessa's face blanched. Her polished smile cracked, her eyes flashing panic before she forced a laugh. "Children, they do say the silliest things," she stammered. But the damage was done. Ethan kept his gaze fixed on his plate, his face pale. I stepped forward, my voice calm and steady. "Oliver is right. I'm doing well. And I am grateful for this town, for your kindness, and for my grandson, who reminds me every day that love and truth outshine everything else." The hall erupted again, louder this time. Margaret's eyes shone as she squeezed my hand. Vanessa tried to recover, chatting brightly with those around her, but the whispers lingered. I saw the sidelong glances, the nods toward me, the faint smiles that said, "We see through her now." That night, Margaret walked me back to the cabin. The air was crisp, stars scattered like diamonds across the sky. "You saw their faces," she said softly. "They believe you, Helen. Not her." I nodded slowly, clutching Michael's notebook to my chest. For the first time, I feel like the tide has turned. Inside, by the fire, I opened the notebook. My hand was steady as I wrote. Tonight, she tried to erase me again. But Oliver, in his innocence, revealed the truth. The town laughed at her lie. This is the first victory. I will not stop. Justice doesn't shout. It shines. And soon, she will stand in the shadows where she belongs. I closed the notebook, the flames flickering against Michael's photograph. "They thought they could erase me," I whispered. But tonight, I erased her mask. The fundraiser for the new children's wing was the talk of the town all week. Banners hung across Main Street, and the fellowship hall buzzed with preparations. I arrived early with Margaret, our arms full of books and bean bags for the reading corner. "Look at this," Margaret said, smoothing a quilt over a stack of cushions. "It feels like a little haven." I smiled, placing picture books on the shelf. "The children deserve it. A place to dream, even for an hour." Children peeked in as we set up, eyes shining. "Can we read now?" a little girl asked eagerly. "Not yet, sweetheart," I said with a laugh. "Tonight." As we worked, I saw Vanessa sweep in with her clipboard, her heels clicking against the floor like a metronome. She gave me a smile as polished as glass. "Remember, Helen," she said sweetly, "don't push yourself. Greeting guests and sitting with children is quite enough." I met her gaze, calm and steady. "Don't worry. I'm stronger than you think." When evening came, the hall glowed under lanterns and strings of lights. Tables overflowed with casseroles, roasts, and pies. Families filled every seat. Vanessa floated from group to group, her laugh ringing high above the hum of conversation. Ethan trailed beside her, quiet, his smile thin. At my corner, I gathered the children. Their laughter soon rose above the din as I read Goodnight Moon, changing my voice for the little bunny. Parents stopped to watch, some recording on their phones. That was when it happened. A loud crash echoed through the hall. I turned to see a tray of punch tumbling across the floor. Red liquid splattering the tiles. Gasps rippled. And there, standing with wide eyes, was Vanessa pointing straight at me. "Oh dear," she cried. "Helen, were you carrying that? You must be more careful. These floors are so slippery, and at your age, whispers spread like wildfire." My heart clenched, but then Margaret's voice cut through. "No, she wasn't," Margaret snapped. "I saw you pass that tray to the young man just seconds ago. He slipped, not Helen." All eyes turned. The teenager blushed, raising his hand. "It was me," he admitted. "Sorry, I tripped." The room stilled. Vanessa's smile faltered, her cheeks flushing. She let out a brittle laugh. "Oh, my mistake, of course. I only meant—" But Oliver's small voice carried clear. "Mommy, why did you say Grandma did it when she didn't? That's not nice." Laughter bubbled across the hall. Some parents shook their heads, whispering. Ethan pressed his lips tight, staring down at his plate. I knelt by Oliver, brushing his hair back. "It's all right, sweetheart. Sometimes people make mistakes." I looked up, my gaze steady on Vanessa. "What matters is telling the truth." The applause that followed wasn't for me alone. It was for what everyone in that hall had just witnessed. Later, as I packed the last of the books, Oliver tugged my sleeve. "Grandma, can I come stay at the cabin soon, please?" Vanessa stiffened, her hand clenching her purse strap. "We'll see," I said gently, giving Oliver a reassuring smile. That night, by the fire's glow, I opened Michael's leather notebook. She tried to humiliate me. She even staged a fall to blame me. But the truth caught her first: Margaret's voice, Oliver's innocence, and the eyes of this town. Tonight, she didn't just lose face, she lost trust. And trust is the first thread to unravel everything else. I set the pen down, the flames crackling softly. "They thought I was fragile, Michael," I whispered. "But she's the one crumbling now. Soon, it won't just be her mask that breaks, it will be everything she built upon it." It started with a drawer I hadn't opened in years. The rain drummed softly on the cabin roof as I dusted Michael's old desk. My fingers brushed against a handle, stiff with age. I pulled, and the drawer slid open with a groan. Inside lay a leather envelope, the edges worn smooth by time. My breath caught as I lifted it. Michael's handwriting danced across the front. My hands shook as I unfolded the contents. A deed, to the very land the cabin stood on. Signed, sealed, paid in full. My name etched clearly across the bottom. Beneath it, a small bank book, the balance modest but untouched. I pressed the papers to my chest. Memories rushed back. Michael hammering boards into place, laughing when a nail bent. The smell of pine and sawdust. The way he'd kissed my forehead the night he told me, "This cabin will always be yours." Tears blurred my vision. All these years, I had lived like a guest in my own home, believing I had nothing. But Michael had left me not just love, he had left me roots. That evening, I spread the documents across Margaret's kitchen table. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Helen, do you understand? This means the cabin is truly yours. No one can take it." I swallowed. "Vanessa told me it was Ethan's, that I was just visiting." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "She lied. And now you have the truth." For days, I carried the papers hidden in Michael's notebook. Vanessa had grown sharper since the fundraiser. She clung to Oliver, whispering in his ear, tugging his hand whenever he ran toward me. Ethan followed her lead, though his eyes carried a flicker of doubt each time. Sunday came. The church smelled of beeswax and lilies. Stained glass threw colors across the pews. Vanessa sat tall in the front row, her hand resting firmly on Oliver's shoulder. Ethan sat stiff beside her, jaw tight. After the final hymn, Pastor Hill announced, "Before we close, Vanessa has something she'd like to share." She rose gracefully, smile radiant. "As many of you know, Helen has been struggling. Ethan and I have done all we can, but we worry for her safety. We've been considering a retirement home nearby, where she would be cared for properly." Gasps spread through the congregation. My breath stilled. Retirement home. Erased. Vanessa looked around, her voice lilting sweetly. "It would be best for everyone, don't you agree?" Before I could stand, Oliver wriggled free from her grip. "That's not true, Mommy," he said loudly. "Grandma has her own house. She showed me the papers. The cabin is hers." The church froze. Vanessa's smile faltered, her hand reaching to pull him down. But Oliver kept going, eyes wide with honesty. "And she makes me cocoa there. You said we shouldn't bother her, but Grandma said I'm always welcome." A ripple of whispers surged through the pews. A woman behind me whispered, "So she owns the cabin." Another man muttered, "Shame on them for trying to put her away." I rose slowly, my hands steady. "It's true," I said softly, my voice carrying. "Michael made sure of it before he passed. The cabin is mine, and I intend to honor his gift." Pastor Hill stepped forward, clasping my hand. "Praise God for Michael's wisdom. Helen, you are a blessing to this town." Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then swelling. Margaret's eyes glistened as she nodded from across the aisle. Vanessa's face burned crimson. Ethan stared down at his hymnal, unmoving. That night, back at the cabin, I laid the deed and bankbook before me. The fire crackled, shadows dancing on the walls. I opened Michael's notebook. Today, she tried to erase me, to lock me away. But the truth could not be silenced. Oliver's voice carried it, and this town heard. She has lost their trust, and trust is the first stone pulled from the wall she built around herself. I set the pen down, staring at Michael's photo. For a moment, I swore his eyes twinkled in the flickering firelight. "They thought they could bury me, Michael," I whispered. "But you planted me deep, and now she will feel the earth shift beneath her feet." The town square buzzed with music and chatter. Vanessa had outdone herself for the community fair, stringing banners from lamppost to lamppost, booths brimming with baked goods and crafts. She moved through the crowd like a queen, Ethan trailing at her side, Oliver clutching a balloon. "Remember," she whispered sharply as I passed, her smile never wavering. "Behave yourself. We wouldn't want another misunderstanding." I smiled calmly. "Don't worry. The truth has a way of speaking for itself." Margaret squeezed my hand. "Just wait," she whispered. The evening's highlight was the raffle drawing, a fundraiser Vanessa had insisted on managing. She stood at the microphone, radiant, her voice carrying across the square. "Thank you all for trusting me with tonight's event. Together, we've raised more than we ever dreamed possible. Truly, I couldn't have done it without Ethan, and without Helen's small contribution." The word small hung in the air, sharp as a blade. Murmurs rippled. I stepped forward, holding a small envelope. "Actually," I said clearly, "there's something I'd like to share." All eyes turned. I unfolded the envelope. Inside lay a copy of Michael's deed. Gasps spread as I held it up. This cabin, my cabin, was Michael's gift to me. For years, I thought I had nothing. But he made sure I would always have a home, and with it, the ability to give back. Vanessa's smile faltered. "How touching," she said quickly. "But really, Helen, we must be realistic. You've been—" Oliver's voice cut through, clear and loud. "Mommy, you said you wanted to sell Grandma's cabin and use the money for yourself, but you told everyone she doesn't have anything." The crowd stilled, heads turned sharply. Vanessa froze, her face draining of color. Ethan's lips parted, then pressed tight. At last, he stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "Oliver's telling the truth. Vanessa wanted to list the cabin. I couldn't agree." A stunned hush fell over the square. Margaret's hand found mine, squeezing tight. Vanessa laughed shrilly, too high, too brittle. Children, they imagine things, but the murmurs grew louder, disbelieving. Someone whispered, "She lied." Another? All this time, I lifted my chin. The truth doesn't need defending. It speaks for itself. Applause erupted, not thunderous, but steady and sure, for me, not her. Later, as lanterns flickered in the cooling night, I walked home with Margaret and Oliver. Ethan lingered behind, shoulders heavy, eyes shadowed. That night, by the fire, I opened Michael's notebook. She tried again, draped in ribbons and smiles. But tonight, her mask cracked beyond repair. Oliver's innocence, Ethan's courage, and the truth buried too long, all of it rose against her. She has lost their faith, and soon she will lose everything else. I closed the notebook, the fire warm against my skin. They thought I was powerless, Michael, I whispered. But tonight, she learned the ground she stood on was never hers. By Monday morning, the whispers had spread faster than wildfire. At the bakery, 2 women leaned over the counter. "She tried to sell Helen's cabin, can you believe it?" I always said something didn't sit right with her smile. At the library, parents approached me, their voices warm. "We owe you an apology, Helen. We should never have doubted you." Another added softly, "You've been the heart of this community all along." Each word stitched me back together. For years I had been invisible. Now, the town finally saw me. Vanessa, on the other hand, could not walk down Main Street without feeling the sting of eyes on her. People still smiled, but it was thinner now, brittle. Whispers followed her like a shadow. She clutched Ethan's arm tighter than ever, but he had begun to pull away. That Thursday, Margaret and I set pies on the library table for the children's reading hour. Oliver burst through the door, his eyes shining. "Grandma!" he cried, racing into my arms. Vanessa followed a beat later, her face pale. "Oliver," she hissed, "I told you." But the librarian interrupted, smiling warmly. "Mrs. Thompson, you should know Helen has been a blessing here. The children adore her." Oliver tugged my hand. "Can I stay, Mommy? Please?" Vanessa hesitated. For the first time, I saw real cracks in her mask, fear, sharp and raw. She finally nodded stiffly. "Fine, an hour." We read, we laughed, we sang. When it was time to leave, Oliver clung to me. "Grandma, can I come to the cabin this weekend?" he whispered. I glanced at Vanessa, her lips pressed tight, her eyes burning, but she said nothing. That evening, as I walked home under the setting sun, Ethan appeared at my side. He looked older, wearier, as though the past weeks had aged him years. "Mom," he said quietly, "I'm sorry for everything." My breath caught. I wanted to reach for him, but I only nodded. "You don't have to say it. Just do better for Oliver." He swallowed hard, then nodded. That night by the fire, I wrote in Michael's notebook, "The town sees her now. They see me." Oliver runs to me with joy. Ethan's silence is breaking. She thought she could erase me, but her mask has shattered. Soon, she will stand with nothing left to hide behind. I closed the book, my heart steady. And then, the knock came. Sharp, relentless. I opened the door. There stood Vanessa, her perfect hair limp, her eyes rimmed red. "We need to talk," she whispered, her voice stripped of sugar. The knock came again, sharper this time. I opened the door. Vanessa stood there, mascara streaked, her once perfect hair limp against her cheeks. For the first time, she looked small. "Can I come in?" she asked, voice brittle. I stepped aside. The fire crackled as she entered, her eyes darting over Michael's photo on the mantel. "You've turned everyone against me," she spat suddenly, though her voice shook. "They whisper in the bakery, the market, even church. Do you know what that feels like?" I folded my hands in my lap. "Yes, I know exactly what that feels like. Her lips trembled. For a moment, the mask slipped entirely. I just I just wanted a life. A good life. Better than the one I had. Her eyes burned into mine. And you? You were always there. Perfect Helen. Saint Helen. Ethan's mother. The one he ran to. Do you know how suffocating that was? I let the silence stretch. The only sound, the pop of the fire. I was never perfect, I said softly. I was just trying to love him. And you could have too. But instead, you chose control, lies, and now you're losing everything because of it. Her face hardened. You think you've won? You think they'll forget who you really are? A widow with nothing? I reached to the side table and placed the deed in front of her. The firelight gleamed off the paper. No, Vanessa. A widow with everything Michael left her. A home. A grandson. Who loves her. And a town that finally sees her truth. Her hand hovered over the paper, trembling. For a moment, I thought she might tear it. But instead, she snatched her hand back, her nails digging into her palm. Behind us, the door creaked. Ethan stood there, his face pale, his eyes hollow. He had heard everything. Vanessa, he said quietly. Enough. Her eyes widened, panic flickering. Ethan. But he shook his head, his voice breaking. I can't do this anymore. Not like this. Oliver's small footsteps pattered down the hall. He ran straight to me, burying his face in my lap. Grandma, he whispered. Don't let Mommy take me away. I held him close, my heart steady. Vanessa's shoulders slumped, her mascara running as she turned and fled into the night. Later, by the fire, I opened Michael's notebook. Tonight, the battle ended. She came here, broken, and left with nothing. Ethan saw. Oliver chose. And I am still standing. She tried to erase me, but I am carved in truth, and truth will outlast her lies. I closed the book. Oliver's small hand curled in mine. They thought I would fade, Michael, I whispered. But I am still here, and I am free. The days that followed felt lighter, as though a long shadow had finally lifted. For the first time in years, I woke without the weight of dread pressing on my chest. The cabin, bathed in morning light, felt like home again. Not a place of exile, but of belonging. Word of Vanessa's breakdown at my door traveled quickly. Some said she had fled to her sisters in another county. Others whispered she was staying at a motel on the edge of town. Wherever she was, she no longer held the town's favor, nor Ethan's unquestioning loyalty. Ethan came by the cabin one crisp Saturday morning. He stood awkwardly at the porch, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Mom, he said softly, Oliver's inside the truck. He wanted to come, but I thought we should talk first. I stepped onto the porch, the autumn wind brushing my hair. You've seen the truth now, I said gently. He nodded, eyes glistening. I let her turn me against you. I saw what I wanted to see, because it was easier than facing the lies. I'm sorry. For a moment, the years of hurt pressed against me like a wave. But then I saw Oliver's small face, pressed to the truck window, waiting. And I knew forgiveness was the only path forward. I can't change the past, I whispered, but we can choose what happens next. Tears streaked his face as he pulled me into a tentative embrace. Thank you, Mom. That afternoon, Oliver bounded through the cabin, laughter echoing off the walls. We baked cookies, the air sweet with vanilla. Margaret joined us later, bringing apples for pie. For the first time in so long, the cabin was filled with warmth and voices again. That night, after Oliver had fallen asleep curled in a quilt, I sat by the fire and opened Michael's notebook one last time. The battle is over. I did not need to shout nor to strike. I only needed the truth and love to stand. Vanessa is gone from our lives. Her lies turned to ash. Ethan has returned, humbled. Oliver's laughter fills this home. And I am free. I closed the notebook and placed it on the mantel beside Michael's photo. The flames flickered gently, as though he were smiling back at me. They thought they had taken everything, Michael, I whispered. But in the end, I still have what matters most. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to simply rest in peace, in love, in the quiet triumph of truth. If there is one thing life has taught me, it is this. We are far stronger than we believe, and far more loved than we sometimes realize. For years, I thought sacrifice meant silence. That to love my son, I had to endure anything. That to keep peace, I had to let myself disappear. But the truth is, when you erase yourself, you teach others to erase you too. It took losing everything, respect, dignity, even the closeness of my own child, to realize that I had never been empty. The love Michael left me, the laughter of my grandson, the quiet kindness of a friend like Margaret, they were proof I had worth all along. And when I finally chose to stand in that truth, the lies could no longer hold. So, to anyone who feels invisible, know this. You are not defined by the ones who dismiss you, nor by the voices that say you're not enough. Your value does not vanish because others refuse to see it. Sometimes, justice does not come in shouts or vengeance, but in the steady, undeniable light of truth. I am living proof. And if I, a weary widow in a little cabin, can rise again, so can you. Before I close this chapter, I want to thank you, yes, you, listening to my story. Thank you for walking with me through the shadows and into the light. Your time, your heart, your willingness to listen, they mean more than I can ever say. If my journey has touched you, if it has reminded you of your own strength or the value of your truth, then sharing it was worth every word. We mothers, we women, we people who have known loss and sacrifice, we are never truly alone. And by being here, you've reminded me of that. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. May you carry this light into your own life, and may you never forget that you, too, are worthy of love and respect.